Welcome to Quack&Co, where every conversation is 10 minutes or less. My name is Tony Vicinda. I'm Chief Alchemist over at Plus One EXP. So we do a lot of coverage around board games. We do a lot of conversations around RPGs, and this week we're taking over. So I want to talk today about a common conversation in RPGs that I think actually is far more applicable to board gamers than a lot of people give it credit for. And that's about something that we call table culture. So table culture is the idea of the understanding and the type of play that you sit down at and want to engage in at your table or the tables that you sit at on a regular basis. In RPGs, this has a lot to do with the type of topics you may cover, the way that we treat each other while we're playing. And because RPGs have such a heavy relationship to social influence and the way that we're actually going to interact across the table consistently, it seems like an easy conversation to have there. There's a lot of nuance and dynamics. We have things like safety tools, lines, and veils that determine what we can and can't talk about, ways to pause the game and say, hey, here's a conversation we need to have, clarify something, and then hop back in. All these things make it really easy to navigate the flow of play and make sure everybody around the table is having a good time. My experience with board games has been a little bit different. And just so you know, I came into the hobby through board games. I grew up playing both normal board games that you would get from Hasbro's, Parker Brothers, anything like that, along with more intense board games that were a little bit harder to find and off the beaten path. Things like Catan and other things like that in the early days of it coming out. So I'm somebody who grew up on and loving board games, and a lot of the interactions that I would have oftentimes would become very adversarial. They would become very heated. I was a man in black, a demo agent for Steve Jackson Games for about 5 years. And so when Munchkin was releasing it in its heyday, there would oftentimes be moments at the table where people were literally screaming at each other. And a lot of it came down to, hey, is this the style of play the game is actually causing us to engage in? But also asking the question, is this really what we want from an experience sitting down and playing? Are there better ways to navigate these conversations? Is there a social contract that we should create as we sit down or as we get together for game night to talk about what we want to do? And then again, in RPGs, this is a pretty normal thing. Most tables, if they're sitting down to play for the first time, will do something called a session zero. They'll talk about what they want to get out of the game. They'll do a little bit of world building. They'll start talking about and thinking about their characters. They'll create things that are off limits and can't be addressed. They'll talk about the things they really want to see included in the game. And I actually think this is just as applicable for board games as it is for RPGs. Sure, we're not going to necessarily be making characters or building worlds together, but in some board games, you will be doing those things. And it is good to have those conversations. But you are going to decide who sits around your table. You're going to decide what hospitality looks like if you're hosting people. You're going to decide what types of games and mechanics you want to engage in, what themes make the most sense for what you're doing. These are all conversations you should have. And lots of times, the first game night you have is going to be somebody saying, hey, I have a new game that I want to play. Or you might have been playing with the same group of people for 10 years, and you figured out a lot of these things organically. But I see a lot of new groups go into this very kind of stormy phase early on if they don't pick the right games, and the right game set them at odds with each other. I was a youth worker for 20 years, and there were games that I had to pull out of our youth group and youth rooms because they would cause people to be inflamed at each other, and it would cause fights to break out across a couple of weeks. Even games as simple as Mafia sometimes had to be redlined because people couldn't let go of the fact that somebody killed them the last game and they weren't a member of the Mafia. All of these types of things come up. So here's a couple things I would love for you to consider as you're thinking about the table culture in your group and how that influences your play culture. One, who do we invite? Who do you want to have around your table? Is it open to everyone? Is this a game group with a specific function or community that's built up around it? Both of those things are fine, but you want to know that. You want to be able to express that. Where is it being hosted? Who is hosting it? And who's responsible for hospitality? Things as simple as who's bringing the snacks, who's bringing the drinks, who's helping with cleanup, who's helping with setup, who's helping with takedown. Those are all parts of game night. It may just be the person whose house it's at, or you may be meeting up at a local game cafe. All those things may influence that, but knowing those kind of simple logistic tasks ahead of time are great. After that, What kind of themes do you want to engage in? Are there things that you're excited about? And even just asking your friends for RPGs, lots of times like, what's your favorite TV shows? What are the things you really love to do? And then looking for games that simulate that experience, that bring that in. Sometimes games that are built in that universe, other times one that just have themes or touchstones that are really similar. And starting to build a list of those so that your players show up, even if they don't know anything about the game, excited to play, so that you and your friends are looking forward to things. And then if people have game knowledge, if they know about design or the different types of mechanics that go into a game, what type of mechanics are you interested in? Do you love worker placement? Do you love blind bidding? Is hidden roll the thing that you are all about? Do you like a little bit of role playing in your board games, or are you looking for something that's more of an abstract tactical experience that's really just about the pieces on the board? You want to know those things. And it may not be that everyone is perfectly satisfied every single time, and that's okay. That's part of the reason you set up the social contract, not a physical one, but just the conversation of what are we trying to do? And then at the end of every single night, checking in with people. Did you like this? Was this fun? Do we want to play this again? Is there something that was missing? Is there something you didn't understand that made this experience not enjoyable for you? And it doesn't have to be a rigorous process. It's the conversation you have while you're cleaning up and enjoying a drink together or enjoying a snack together and closing out the night. These things are important, and they're things that in RPGs are a very normal, organic part of what we do when we play, that I think it would benefit a lot of the tables that I've sat at in the past to think about. So if you've never thought about table culture, if you've never thought about how you're building up the space in which you play games, if you've never thought about how you're creating a space for your friends to come in and have the experience that you want, I'd encourage you to start asking some of those questions, looking for some of those things. And again, don't feel the need to tackle them all at once. And if you've got a game group that's going great, let it keep on being amazing. But if you're looking to start that next great game group in your life, think a little bit more about table culture. My name's Tony Vicenda from Plus One EXP. This is Quack&Co, and we're taking over this week.